Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep. Just give me 1 sec. All right. There we go. How's it going, young man?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Just getting over nasty whatever this was that's been going around.
I hear my youngest just got over it, and now my wife's got it. So it's going around our house too.
Well, it hit Grindhouse last weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, there was probably half dozen, if not more, that got it.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, so they weren't, a lot of people not too happy because they had to miss bookings from over the weekend.
Yeah, that stinks.
So, anyways, Klayton, welcome to Rockin the Ring with Metal Mike. We've been wanting to do this for almost since I started.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, so I appreciate you stopping in. I know the rumor mill is you've retired.
I mean, does anybody ever really retire in wrestling? You know?
That's why I never broached the concept with you. Because, like you said, I mean, you came back and did that one-off show at the school you teach at.
Yeah.
So
So
that was awesome, dude. I was quite impressed with that to make the rounds like it did, and I've heard rumblings that won't be the first school that Grindhouse will work with, possibly.
yeah, I hope so. I'm hoping to. I mean, I think I know our school was really happy with it. And like I was telling Ronnie, those guys, I was like, I said, I can't imagine anybody seeing that and not thinking that, that would be something cool to do for for their kids. So hopefully they get they get some more work out of that, and that some other schools hit them up.
So that's actually where my stepkids went to middle school way back when. So
Really?
yeah, I live what, about 5 miles from there now, but we lived over off Valley Station Road back in the day
Oh, wow. Okay.
when they were younger. So it's probably been 15 years. Because I mean, the youngest one's 30. So my kids are older. They're all adults. You've seen a few of those booing you in the
Right.
crowd at different times. So, well, anyways, to start off, let's introduce yourself. Tell people a little bit about you. You don't have to go into a lot of details about your personal life if you don't like. We've discussed that before. That's why we're using your Klayton name, not your real name, in this interview, and out of respect of what you wished for.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, well, I guess where you want to start? You want to? I mean, you want it from the beginning, or I mean, what?
Yeah, just give a basic assumption of who you are right now, and then we'll go back and look at what you've done in wrestling and what got you there. Because I mean, you are an older student to the game. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I am. I said I'm. Outside of the ring, I'm. Husband and father of three. I've got my oldest son is 11, and then I've got a middle daughter who's 8, and then my youngest is 6. I'm actually I'm in the middle of a baseball practice as we speak, so I'm doing kind of on dad duty even right now. They take up a lot of my time. I'm a school teacher. I taught PE and health for about almost 17 years. I have a little bit different role at the school I'm at now, but that's what my certification is in physical education and health. Coached, I played sports all through high school, and so I coached high school basketball for close to 20 years. So I had a good run with that. And then did the wrestling, had the wrestling going for a little while too, that I don't think I was too bad at, if I do say so myself. So
No, I mean, you've done it for a few years, and you were involved in one of the biggest storylines. To me, was bigger than, I mean, if people watched it and paid attention to it, to me, it was better than the story that they told with Cody leading into WrestleManias the last couple of years. I mean, that was a great story, but there was so many twists and turns with your story with Birdo at Grindhouse and elsewhere. I mean, you've had multiple different types of stories going with Birdo. And so, what brought you to wrestling? I mean, like I said, later in life, you've been a sports. We know, as you just said, been involved with sports for a long time, and wrestling's some sports. Some people that's involved in sports don't look at wrestling as a sport or anything like that. But to go from basketball to baseball to pro wrestling, that's sometimes a stretch because you think of football players or a amateur wrestler background to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I mean, as far as the wrestling, I was involved in sports stuff all grown up. And I'm a lifelong pro wrestling fan. I mean, I grew up watching it. Uh, the time that I was young, I mean, watching old Coliseum home videos and trying to find, the superstars broadcasts and stuff on the weekend on whatever channels I had at home. So, I've always been a lifelong fan. And when I graduated, I've told other people this too. When like I said, I haven't specifically mentioned my age, but I'm sure people can do the math. But when I graduated high school in the early 2000s, wrestling was still, it wasn't quite as open as it is now. I think, not only with how people kind of having a better idea of kind of how the business works and kind of what professional wrestling is, but how to become a pro wrestler. Nowadays, everybody knows about from the WWE Performance Center on down, you can find a wrestling school, you can find a place to train. There's so many independents, in the Kentuckiana area even. But when I was entering college and kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, it wasn't that way. If it had been, I think that's probably what I would have pursued while I was in college, straight out of a high school. At least while I was in school, I would have definitely seen myself being like going to class and then probably spending whatever free time I had. I think that's training for wrestling because I loved it that much and was definitely interested in it. But at that time, it was still a lot of, how do you become a pro wrestler? There still wasn't, it was still kind of, unless you knew somebody or had a connection, it wasn't as kind of out in the open of like, hey, if you want to be a wrestler, call this number or, look up this school or, Google somebody and, find somewhere to train. So yeah, I was a little bit later to the game. I was in my mid 30s when I started training, when I finally got hooked up with a training school. I went down. It was actually funny enough. I knew at the time the commissioner for the Kentucky Wrestling and Boxing Commission was a family friend, and he knew I was a wrestling fan. He'd actually taken me to a couple of shows, and I'd been able to go backstage with him and do some fun things. And so he was the one that finally said, "Hey, if you're really serious about trying to get involved in this, go contact Larry D in Paris, Kentucky." And so Larry D is who I actually got a hold of at the time. He had primetime wrestling going down in Paris. And that's who I actually contacted and went and signed up with his training school down there in Paris. He was the trainer. Ronnie Roberts was his head trainer. And so those two guys were the guys that trained me. And really, I give Ronnie a lot of credit as far as being a little bit more of the hands-on guy, because Larry was obviously, he was knee deep in his, in-ring career, was traveling all over the place, doing, Pro Wrestling Revolver and, eventually got signed to TNA and, was doing all these different shows and was, like I said, was super busy. So Ronnie was really a lot more of kind of the hands-on guy that trained me. I mean, if I consider really Ronnie my trainer. Larry did a lot of, did some good work with us too, and really helped me a lot and was always good to me. But Ronnie was the guy that taught me the basics, and then that taught me the things that I needed to know to, to get started becoming a pro wrestler. He put me through the paces, and he was really the one that got me started.
Okay. So so that's how you got up to Grindhouse and student connections with Ronnie. Then is that correct?
Yeah, I trained with Larry down there at Primetime Wrestling for about I guess about 2 years in total. Like I said I was down there as much as I could at the time I was training. I was still obviously I had my teaching job. I was coaching basketball, which during the season kept me real busy. So I still went down there as much as I could. They were running shows every Sunday, so we would train before the shows on Sundays, sometimes during the week as well. And so, like I said, I was there probably in total for about a year and a half or 2 years. Um, Wrestled my first official match. I got at a student showcase that we had at one of the fair shows that they ran. So I got my first official match in a student showcase there. Did a couple of matches at the on a PTW show. A couple of other places I went and had a match in Tennessee for IWA. So got a couple matches under my belt, and then COVID hit, and that was when everything got, obviously everything got shut down. So kind of once the COVID break hit, the way I found my way to Grindhouse was Ronnie had moved up that way, had become the head trainer at Grindhouse Academy. And at the time, if you remember, Indiana kind of opened up a little earlier than Kentucky as far as what they were allowing when it came to athletics and sports. They opened up. I think even if you remember, even OVW ran a couple of shows there at the arena because OVW wasn't running because Kentucky was shut down. So when Indiana opened back up and started letting athletic events take place again and having small crowds, OVW even used the arena to tape some of their TV. So Ronnie was up there. He actually contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm training at Grindhouse now. Would love to. I know it was a closer drive for me. I live more in the Louisville area, so going to Jeffersonville was a little bit of a short. It was about half the driving time than going down to Paris." So he said, "Hey, check with Larry if he's cool with it. I'd love to have you up this way. Start training with me and some of my students I've got up here. Knock the ring rust off a little bit." And so that's what I did. I got Larry's blessing, and so I started training at Grindhouse with Ronnie, and worked with him. And basically, we trained until kind of COVID was over. And when we started opening up, I want to say I probably started training with Ronnie in I'm not even sure, maybe October of whatever, 2021, whatever that was. And then I think we had our first kind of Grindhouse welcome back show like April or May of that next year when everything kind of started opening back up and things were kind of sort of going back to normal. So yeah, I was with them, and then once Grindhouse kind of got back up and running, we hit the ground running with that, and then I was with them, to the end. I said, obviously I worked other places, but I've been with Grindhouse since they got back up and running, and I said it was April or May of, I guess it would have been 2022. So.
Yeah. That was right about the time I started going to Grindhouse. I mean, I was keeping up with them, but that was the time I started going pretty much every week, every month. I mean, it's and then I work, and then of course, I worked behind the scenes, working with another podcast, and we had a title, right. And I loved it, and I still love going over, and the respect they've shown me as an outsider, it just blows my mind. I come in there, I was like, "Hey, you want to talk? Here's your platform. It's free. We'll get your name out there, and as best as we can. I mean, it's a 53-year-old man having fun as his kids got older.
Right.
But you seem like, I mean, and I've always known you've been, like I said, a busy man, and I don't know how you do it because like I said, you got 3 younger children that are and are sports affiliated. Plus, you're doing your own sports. Plus, working a full-time day job, and then every couple of weekends you were going out on the road working for Grindhouse or EWA or a couple of the other smaller promotions in Kentucky. And then, like I said, you were right at the top of the ladder, almost both all the promotions. And I applaud you for that. I mean, and you knew when to take your breaks to make sure the kids were there. You were there for the kids. That's a plus too. Like I said, I'll applaud you for that too because you don't see that.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it's definitely a grind. No pun intended. And you know, I take a lot of pride, like I said, in that most of the places that I've been and when I've worked my way up to gaining, I guess, the trust and respect of the promoters and stuff to have a good spot on the card and be someone that they feel like that they can trust to, put in a story or put in a feature, spot to, with their shows and things. Um, but it's definitely a balance. Trying to, and I applaud, and there's guys, and like I said, uh, I'm well aware that, that in the grand scheme of things, there's guys that are doing 3 times as much as I ever did. And more power to him. I did what I could. I did, like you said, what I had time for. I still tried to keep my priorities straight. I started older. I am older. I do already have a family. I have a career, so there were some things that I had to put ahead of, this passion for wrestling that I have. And I do have a passion for it. But like I said, I didn't feel like I was at a point in my life where I could always make that the number one priority. And like I said, if I was younger, if I had an avenue to pursue this when I was 21, and coming out of college or in college or, 18 years old, even straight out of high school, then that might have been different. But my situation, was what it was. And so I try to, keep things in perspective and keep my priorities straight, with what I think, for me works and is important. But yeah, even in, that's what amazes me about these guys that do it and are doing it for a living, that make a lot of their living on the road and in wrestling. Because, even with, if I was going somewhere to maybe on the off month, maybe 3 weekends out of the month, traveling, doing sometimes weekday shows in OVW. So going up there, on a Thursday in the middle of the week, where I'm leaving straight from work to head to the, to the arena to do the TV for OVW and things like that. And, and I've got a wife at home that's holding down the fort, with all 3 kids and that type of thing. So, and like I said, and I was doing, what I would consider really a minimum of, of bookings and things, or at least what I could handle. So the guys that, that really get after it and live life on the road and are making their living doing this, I have the utmost respect for, because like I said, because I know how hard and difficult it got at times for me to even just doing what I was doing, and it was nothing compared to, like I said, guys like Larry D, guys like Ronnie, guys like the Outrunners, who trained me, who trained with us a little bit in at Grindhouse, that I actually got the privilege to be trained by, Turbo and Chase, Magnum and those guys. They actually trained me for a little bit, and to see them, the grind that they had to get where they are now in OVW and ROH. And, so, I've seen guys that have done it and that have made it, and the sacrifice that it takes to get there. And so, like I said, I have the utmost respect for them that really get after this and make this, truly make this their life and their living.
Yeah. I mean, talking about those two, the Outrunners, they've pushed it. I mean, I wouldn't have thought when they first started tagging. I mean, they were great workers. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, is this gimmick survivable? Is it going to? Is it just going to be a niche at OVW? And then now it's one of the biggest tag teams going still on the. I mean, ROH has got its good following, and it always has. But it's not they're not in the ROH of the past, but they still got a full-time job with Tony Khan, and it's like, man.
I said, it's awesome I always love them anyway. And then, they're so entertaining to me. I said they're great workers, but also they're just so entertaining. And to see them, like you said, make that gimmick work on a big stage. I said I think they're one of the most entertaining things. Anytime I see them on TV, they're one of the most entertaining part of the show that I see. And then I would like them. They're the type of team that I would like anyway. So then to also kind of sort of know them also on a somewhat personal level, like I said, to know the work that they've put in makes it even cooler. I told somebody just a little while ago that how cool it was when I would listen when I go to the gym. A lot of times I listen to Pandora and I just put it on like wrestling radio. I just listen to like entrance music is what I work out to usually when I'm in the gym. And lo and behold, a couple weeks ago, there's the Outrunners AEW theme song that pops up on Pandora, and there's Turbo and Magnum on my cell phone, and I'm just like, I know those guys. Like I've talked, like they trade, like that is just so awesome to me to be able to be like you said, to be like, man, like look how far they have pushed that and made it. And like you said, I don't know if a lot of people who maybe just saw them in OVW or maybe just saw them on an independent show on a card a couple years ago would have called that and would have thought that act would get to where they are. But if you also know them and know the work that they've put into it and how dedicated they are, it's also at the same time, it's not surprising.
Right. I mean, I can go back. I mean, I was going to OVW in the class of 2002 when they were there, and you had Cena and Brock and Randy Orton and Eugene and Shelton Benjamin, and to watch those guys come through when they were nobodies, and then to tell people, "Oh, I know them," and they're looking at you like you've got two heads because they're like, "No, you don't." Kind of. I was there when they started, and and they're just like the guys at Grindhouse. They know who was there at the beginning, and everything. All right. So, growing up as a wrestling fan, then what was your inspirations? You're talking about people that have trained you. Let's look at who said, "Hey, I want to be that guy," or be like that guy.
I mean, I'm an '80s kid, so obviously Hogan, was the man. He was the larger than life guy that kind of drew me into the pageantry and, like I said, the superhero status of professional wrestling. But I have to say, and really, it's kind of funny looking back. I would watch wrestling a lot of times. I would watch wrestling like on the home videos. I can remember playing with one of my neighbors, was my best friend at the time, had WrestleMania 3 on VHS, and we would watch that over and over all the time. We'd rent videos at the video store and things. So, because at the time I didn't get a lot of the live wrestling. We wouldn't get, we didn't have cable, and so I wouldn't see prime time and stuff. I would just watch the VHS tapes that I could get a hold of. And so they may not even be current, but I would just watch whatever I could. But I can remember the first segment that I can vividly remember watching as a kid on TV live was Jake Roberts' Cobra biting Macho Man. That's the first thing I can remember watching on Saturday morning, like watching it as it happened and being just like, oh my gosh, that's a real snake and he's biting his arm. And, I was just like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And really those two guys, I would say, are probably definitely in my top 5 of favorite wrestler. Macho Man Randy Savage is my favorite wrestler of all time. He's my number 1, and Jake Roberts is probably in my top 5. So
that's a good company. That's some good company to think about.
Yeah. So I said, Savage, just everything, the way he worked, the outfits, like I said, the over the top, the voice, like I said, as far everything that I liked about pro wrestling, he embodied. Like I said, the over the top character, the bright clothes, the bright colors, the crazy outfits. He was pro wrestling to me. Jake Roberts was a guy that, again, always, obviously a guy that carries a python to the ring, as a kid is going to catch your attention. But as I got older, and kind of got, hip to the business, even before I became a wrestler, still kind of, getting the gist of it. But then definitely, especially as I got into training to be a professional wrestler, was a guy that I came to appreciate even more for just his psychology, his in-ring style, his promos, the way that he would just, almost in a whisper would cut his interviews, wasn't real boisterous, was a guy that made you listen, his facial expressions, his little ticks that he would have with his eyes and his lips and his eyebrows, like all those little things that you pick up on as you get older, and then you can kind of realize, oh, he was doing that for a reason. Like there's a psychology behind that, and that's why I didn't realize it at the time as an 8-year-old kid. But that's also why I liked him, was because he did those things. I didn't realize that he was doing them on purpose and that he knew why he was doing those things. But so that makes it kind of fun too when you do kind of get in, if you get into the business and start to learn psychology and things like that about why you do the things that you do. It's cool to look back and you kind of realize you knew you liked these guys as a kid, but then now that you're older, you can go back and watch their stuff and realize, oh, that's why I liked them, because they were a good enough worker and they were smart enough to know what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And it worked. Like they hooked me, they hooked me. So, and that's how the magic happens, so so that's really cool to to be able to do too, looking back now where I am now and looking back at you even into your childhood and stuff. The nostalgia and stuff is kind of cool to make that connection.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I went from being the big liking a Hogan and in the 80s, and we went into the 90s and still being a Hogan fan to about the NWO and all
Oh
that.
yeah.
Then slowly moved away from that, and then started to watch the guys that were actually my size. You know, the Eddie Guerreros, the Chris Jerichos, guys that weren't much bigger than I am, and the things they would do. It taught me as a fan that there's a little more to the story here, so to speak.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. I've been sick and then worked this morning,
All
so
right.
I was going to have a list and just got sidetracked this week. So, going back to Grindhouse, so you got started there in 22, and by the end of by the early part of 23, you got for your first championship, wasn't it? In the first, right about first part of 23. Is that about right?
Yeah, if I've got my dates right, I said it kind of all runs together. But yeah, I think I I won the 23 Rumble, and that earned me a title shot. And then yeah, I think I won the Grindhouse Championship for the first time. I believe in April of 23. It was a triple threat match with me, Kevo Thrives, and Aaron Williams, who is one of my. I only got to work with him a couple times, but is still probably one of my favorite people to work with. And that was where I won my first Grindhouse Championships. Yeah, I think it was like I think it was. I know it was at Rise. It was the Rise event. So like I said, that's April. Yeah. So I think April of 23. Yeah, that was my first main event. Well, not my first main event, but my first championship match. And yeah, so on a big show and a triple threat with those two guys, and won my first Grindhouse Championship.
So then, as the year went on, you built up. That's when, and then starting that fall, you befriended Berto, which was a program that was only supposed to last, what I understand, talking to Ronnie and I believe yourself at one point, and Berto, that was only supposed to last not even 2 shows, and this thing went on for almost 2 years because the fans were so invested and hated you, and you just ate it up.
Yeah.
And so, what were your thoughts going into being so disdained when you're, like I said, especially when you're a teacher and you try to get the kids to like you? Well, you're at Grindhouse and you're completely doing the opposite.
Yeah. I mean, I love being the bad guy. That doesn't, being disliked and having heat, getting heat, if you will, has never bothered me. And actually, I said I think it's the most fun part of being a professional wrestler, if you ask me. I think I'm a little bit more natural at that. If I don't know if you would call me a natural heel, but I do seem to kind of thrive in that role, in my opinion. So, so yeah, to me, it's kind of just a natural thing. I kind of just leaned into what I was comfortable with, and that seemed to work out well for me. And like I said, a lot of the people, crowds may not necessarily agree with my point of view on things and the way that I kind of conducted myself, but like I said, that never really bothered me. So the thing with Berto, um, like you mentioned, we're always, things always, and you probably know this, the most important thing, and especially when you're putting on monthly shows or even weekly shows, is listening to your audience and listening to the fans and kind of trying to gauge what they want and what they want to see. And so I think that is kind of, when you look at me and Berto, um, like you said, I think we did kind of catch lightning in a bottle a little bit. I said, I don't know when we first kind of came up with this idea. I went to, if we're, I said, since you already mentioned kind of talking to Ronnie, I went to Ronnie and at the time and mentioned him when I had won the championship. Um, I thought I needed someone to work with, and at the time, I thought Berto was one of the most popular characters we had at Grindhouse, and I thought that our characters would work well together. Just kind of his overall presentation and my presentation, I thought we could do some cool things playing off of each other because we were such polar opposites of each other. Um, and so we kind of, we threw this idea around kind of about, becoming his friend and et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, at the time, we didn't, it was never pitched to me. We never put a time on it and said, okay, well, we'll do this for 3 months and then this is what we have for you. It was just kind of like, okay, we'll try this, see how it goes, see where it goes. And everybody kind of got with it. And we started, Ronnie and Tony, obviously they're kind of the brainchild behind it. Me and Berto would definitely put in our ideas. It was a collaborative effort, for sure. But Ronnie and Tony definitely put in the work, as far as kind of mapping things out. And as it kind of kept getting momentum, we kept coming up with different ideas of what we thought we could do, and they kept working. And along that time, and I don't want this to sound braggadocious or, like I'm taking full credit for anything, but I think if you talk to other people around Grindhouse, they would agree around that time, crowd started to get a little bit bigger, started getting more and more, tickets sold, more and more people at the shows. And so we thought, what we're doing is working and we're gaining interest. We're getting people interested. We're getting people invested in this story. And so we just kind of ran with it until, as far as we could. And I think when you look at from beginning to end, it was over a year that me and Berto were intertwined, from the time that, we first started kind of interacting up until we had the first ever cage match at Grindhouse, at Rise. And that was in 04, I guess.
24, yeah.
Yeah.
24.
It was 04 or 05?
24. Yeah, it was 24.
Okay. I was they all kind of run together. But so from beginning to end, you're looking at about a year and a half worth of story being told, which is something I'm really proud of. I know Berto's proud of it too. And I was most proud of that because, kind of like what I was just saying about getting hooked as pro wrestling as a kid, what hooked me as a kid was the characters and the storylines. It wasn't the matches and it wasn't the moves and it wasn't who's a good in-ring worker and all this stuff. Like that was, it was enjoyable to watch, but especially at the time when you look at the 80s and, even early 90s, it was the stories that caught my attention. That's what made me want to watch was, I wanted to see, hey, what was the bad guy going to do this week? What was the good guy going to say? What was going to happen, in these stories. It was like, a soap opera. So
Yeah.
to me, you know, not only the in-ring stuff, and yes, I take a lot of pride and I'm very appreciative of, being a champion and being trusted in that spot and being a main eventer, for so long. Um, and being looked at as a guy that you can depend on, but also just the story that we created and getting people invested in it to where we were getting bigger crowds. People were willing to pay money, to buy tickets and to set. We had sellout shows at Grindhouse where people that were standing room only. We had people that would come and have to stand in the back against the wall because all the chair seats were sold out. And so I take a lot of pride in that. And like I said, in that we created a story that got people invested and got them wanting to come and see month after month what was going to happen next. And like I said, and we got a year and a half run out of it. And dare I say that if we wanted to, I think we probably could have kept going. I think there were even more chapters to the story that we probably could have told, if we'd wanted to. And I said, and we did even, if some of your, if you guys follow Grindhouse, we had the big cage match that kind of ended that chapter. And then, we wrote a couple more chapters there, towards the end with, me and Berto, being on the same page and, with then Oliver Gunner entering the picture and kind of all the story that unfolded from that. So, so that was really cool to see, like I said, people get with it, to see so many people be invested in that. And like I said, and I think, again, not to sound braggadocious, but I think it was a big success and I'm proud of that.
And I see that, and my like I said, my daughters and one of them boyfriend go to the show, and to see them invested, and like I said, I can see the outside since I'm in an inner circle, but watching their reactions each month with the videos, promos, the match formats that you guys have had, and they're on the edge of their seats, and they're 30 and 25, and you're like, yep, this is why I watched it when I was, like you said, younger. I mean, now I'm just sitting. Everybody's like, "Why?" Everybody, I get people asking me all the time, "Why don't you cheer? Why don't you clap for somebody?" Now I'm a student of the game. I'm sitting there looking at the story being told on both in the ring and out of the ring. So I can respect all that, yeah, and I can see where you want to say you're not braggadocious, but you all did tell a story for that long. You did pack out the arena each and every month, wait for people waiting to see what the next chapter is or the next arc is, so to speak. So, okay, we're going to get ready to get it up because you got stuff going on and I've got stuff going on too. Where
Very
did
good.
you said we were talking before we really started officially? Don't say you're retired yet. So what does that mean to you? Does that say, hey, if they come up with the next story that sounds like it'll work, or is it when time allows, or both?
A hard question to answer. I would say, like I told you before, does anybody ever really retire in wrestling? I don't know. So, um, I wouldn't say has to be something specific. I am very appreciative of what I achieved and the opportunities that I was given while I was, let's say, a full time, wrestler. To like I said, not only in Grindhouse but in other promotions. To work for OVW, for to do all these things. Like I said, that even as a young kid, I wouldn't have thought I would have gotten to do. So I'm very appreciative of what I've done. So I guess I'm at a point where if I never got back in the ring, I would be content with that, and at least content with what I was able to achieve. Um, but like I said, you never say never, and you never, yeah, if it is something that is worth coming back for, worth getting in there. I'm very lucky that to be where I'm at, to also be relatively healthy. Um, I want to, part of the reason, and I think a lot of people go through this, but when I did kind of start to wind it down. Like you said, I've got 3 kids. I want to be able to go to their ball games. I want to be able to coach them in their sports. I want to be able to go to their school functions. So and I'm lucky that, relatively speaking, I can do those things. I can sit, in baseball bleachers for 3 hours a day, and it takes me, it may take me a minute to get up, but I can still, I'm not, walking around with a limp or with a cane or anything like that either, so I can still do those things, and be there for my kids, and do those type and be active, and, still hitting the gym and all that stuff. So I'm, relatively injury free. So like I said, I'm content with where I'm at right now. Um, but like I said, you never say never. So
Yeah. The
my
joke
phone, I've still got, I haven't deleted anybody's number. I've still got my phone. People still know how to get a hold of me. So
No,
you know,
that was the joke I heard from Eugene a few years ago. He's like he was on his retirement tour, and I asked him. I said, "So when you retire?" He says, "When they stop calling."
yeah, that's a good answer. So yeah.
So, all right, we'll close this up with a couple last simple questions. You did say Aaron Williams was one of your favorite opponents. So some of your fondest memories of your, say, the last seven, that sound about 6 or 7 years. Can't keep track of it of your career. What are some of your fondest memories besides the Berto? Let's take Berto out of the Berto story out of the equation, and look at, you can go to EWA, you can go wherever you want, but some of your fondest memories that you've had.
Yeah. Man, it's hard to. Well, I mean, I could talk for an hour just about some of the things that I remember, the things that I enjoyed. But like I said, obviously, yeah, getting work with Berto, being Grindhouse champion, being 2-time champion. My reign at Grindhouse was almost nearly 2 years uninterrupted. There was a little bit of a 2-3 month gap there where I was without the title, but for the most part, it was almost 2 years that I was champion. So, um, very proud of that. Again, being able to be trusted, be put in a position that they trust me to kind of be the face of the company for that long. And like I said, and to have a successful run. I was EWA champion as well. Um, getting to work OVW was cool just because, again, that was a place that I can remember watching as a kid, and just on my local stations, we would get the OVW TV broadcasts. And like you said, I can remember that was a time I can remember seeing Brock Lesnar and Batista when he was Leviathan, and these guys that before they were made it big, seeing them in OVW and knowing who they were just from their OVW time. Um, Getting to work with some, I got to work with Hornswoggle. I got to work with Zach Gowen, Chase Stevens. So guys that have been in the WWE, been in TNA and different places. I got to work a match with Larry D. I got to work one match with him in Grindhouse, and then he was very gracious enough to come and actually work with me at the middle school show that we did, which has been the last match that I wrestled. So getting to work with him, kind of bringing that full circle, getting to actually work with the guy that helped train me, was really cool. Man, I mean, just getting to work with guys like Aaron Williams, Jake Christ was another one that I got to work with. That was on Tyler Matrix. I mean, man, just so many good. Chris Matthews, which was another guy that was with that class of Orton and Cena and Batista and those guys in OVW that, for whatever reason didn't quite make it up to, to have having the WWE career that they did. But he's one of the best guys
He's
that I've
so
been in the
underrated.
ring with.
So
Just,
underrated. Yes, me.
yeah. Just loved being getting to work with him. Anytime I got to work with him was, and it was an honor to be able to work with him. It's so easy, and he was always very um, complimentary of me, which meant a lot to me. For him to tell me that I was a guy that he wanted to work with, and tried to, when we were on shows together, would try to, find ways for us to do things together and work together. So that meant a lot to me for somebody like him to tell me that, you know, that he wanted to work with me. That means a lot. So yeah, I mean, just so many. Like I said, it's hard to whittle it down. Like I said I could talk for an hour just about the different matches I remember and enjoyed, and the guys that I enjoyed working with, and um, so yeah. But so a lot of things stick out in my mind. Like I said I'm just very appreciative of all the opportunities that I've gotten, over the last 6-7 years.
Yeah, I mean, you've had for a short career. I think you've did a whole lot that needs to go be, in my opinion, go back and look upon because, like I said, from the story angles to the matches, like you said with Aaron and Chris and so on. You're one of those people that you took what was given to you and made it better or made it as best as you can. The old pot. They stir it up, throw it in there. Let's work it, and it'll work, and it'll taste good. So the fans would be fed, and they like that. They loved you. I always tell people, you're the person they love to hate. Because of the
Right.
way I mean, even after Berto, the fans were like, "Can we trust him? He's did this for 2 years. Can we trust him?"
Yeah.
That was the look and feeling a lot of people were left with, even when you were done with Grindhouse, and like because they were really looking for you under that mask when Oliver showed up. So
I
the
tried.
betrayal
I
again.
tried to tell everybody that was not me, and they would not believe it. And I think even afterwards, some of them, like you said, still didn't believe it. It was, me, and I think at the time, maybe they disliked Oliver Gunner a little bit more than they disliked me. But I'm also I don't think it was necessarily a love affair between me and the Grindhouse faithful at the time either. But I think they maybe hated Oliver Gunner a little bit more than they hated me at the time.
Yeah, which was surprising, like I said, considering with the things that you all put each other through mentally and not just physically. That cage match was a awesome cage match for a first Grindhouse cage match.
Yeah,
Not,
and I did when you asked me about what stuck out, I didn't even mention that, but yeah, like the cage match at Grindhouse, that was uh that holds a special place in my heart. I said because of because of the fact of I got to do it with Berto. It was the culmination kind of that, at least chapter of that story. It was the first ever cage match the Grindhouse has ever had. Um, we had that was the biggest crowd I believe the Grindhouse has ever had at a show. That's the biggest pre-sale that we've ever done was for that show. The amount of pre-sale tickets that we did before the day of the show,
yeah,
I believe is the most they've ever sold
I
for a
think it
show on a
still is. I
pre-sale
think it still
online.
is.
So yeah, that there's really proud of that whole show, that whole story. I said, but that event in particular, yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. So, well, Clayton, I appreciate you this evening. I mean, sorry it took us so long to finally get together even after retirement, but I'm glad you stopped by to see me. Hopefully, we'll
I,
maybe see you back even at the arena, just visiting, not necessarily in the ring.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah. I appreciate you having me. I'm glad we finally got to do it. And I appreciate all the work that you do, all the stuff that you do, getting guys on. I said, seeing you at the shows, and that takes a lot of work too, a lot of time and effort for what you do. So I appreciate you, giving us a platform to, get ourselves out there.
well, thank you. Good luck with everything. Like I said, hopefully we'll see you soon. Like I said, not necessarily in a ring, but just visiting the crowd. I think the crowd now that you're gone, I don't think they forgot you, but they still wonder probably where'd he go? Where'd Klayton go? I mean, they
Right.
had JoJo Cephas show back up at the Rumble, and everybody's like, he's back.
Yeah. You
So,
never know. You never
you're right.
know. So,
Exactly.
keep your eyes open. I said you never know when it might show back up.
All righty, young man. You have a great evening. Take care of yourself and your family, and we'll catch up soon.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.